The phone call came at 7 in the morning on a Tuesday, and the woman on the other end spoke with the kind of clipped authority that made my coffee suddenly taste bitter. She informed me that the Pinewood Grove Homeowners Association had filed for foreclosure on my house in Boulder, Colorado, and I had 30 days to vacate the premises. I stood there in my kitchen, wearing nothing but boxer shorts in confusion, staring at the mountains through my window while my brain tried to process words that made absolutely no sense. Foreclosure, I repeated, gripping the phone tighter. There must be some mistake. I own this house outright. I paid off my mortgage 3 years ago. The woman, who identified herself as Patricia Hendricks from the HOA board, made a sound like she was sucking on a lemon. Mr. Fletcher, the association took out a loan to fund necessary community improvements, and your property was listed as collateral. You have been in violation of multiple HOA regulations, and the board voted unanimously to proceed with foreclosure proceedings. You received multiple notices. I never signed anything agreeing to that, I said, my voice rising. You cannot just use someone's house as collateral without their permission. The HOA bylaws give the board certain powers in extraordinary circumstances, she replied. I suggest you review Section 12, Paragraph 7 of the covenant. Good day, Mr. Fletcher. She hung up before I could respond. I stood there holding my phone, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. This had to be illegal. It had to be. I bought this house 5 years ago, a modest 3-bedroom ranch-style home in a planned community northwest of Boulder. The HOA had always been strict about lawn care and paint colors, but this was insane. I pulled up my email and started scrolling back through months of messages. There were indeed notices from the HOA, dozens of them, mostly complaints about my grass being a 1/4 inch too long or my trash cans being visible from the street for more than 12 hours. I had paid every single fine they levied, even the ridiculous ones. But nowhere, absolutely nowhere, was there any mention of a loan or my house being used as collateral. My hands were shaking as I called my best friend Marcus, who answered on the 3rd ring. Henry, it is 7 in the morning. This better be good. The HOA is trying to foreclose on my house. There was a long pause. What? I explained everything Patricia had told me, my words tumbling over each other. Marcus, who worked in real estate, let out a low whistle when I finished. That is not legal, man. They cannot just take out a loan using your property without your signature. That is fraud. You need a lawyer, like yesterday. Do you know anyone? My cousin Rebecca, she is a real estate attorney, handles HOA disputes all the time. Let me text you her number. 10 minutes later, I was leaving a voicemail for Rebecca Ellison, explaining my situation and practically begging for an appointment. She called back within an hour, her voice sharp and professional. Mr. Fletcher, I had a cancellation this afternoon. Can you be at my office at 2 with all your documentation? Purchase agreement, HOA covenant, every email and letter they have sent you, everything. Yes, absolutely, thank you. Do not thank me yet. If what you are telling me is accurate, this is potentially criminal fraud, but I need to see the paperwork before I can say for certain. I spent the next several hours gathering every document I could find related to my house and the HOA. The purchase agreement, the original covenant I signed when I bought the property, bank statements showing my mortgage payoff, every single email and letter from the HOA going back 5 years. I stuffed it all into a folder that grew so thick I could barely close it. Rebecca's office was in downtown Boulder, a sleek, modern building with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Flatirons. She was younger than I expected, maybe 35, with dark hair pulled back in a severe bun and glasses that made her look like she could dissect your argument with surgical precision. She spent 45 minutes going through my documents, making notes on a yellow legal pad, her expression growing darker with each page. Finally, she looked up at me. Okay, this is worse than I thought. Show me exactly where they claim you agreed to let them use your house as collateral. They did not show me anything. Patricia just cited some section of the covenant. Rebecca flipped through the covenant, found the section, and read it aloud. In the event of extraordinary financial circumstances requiring immediate community improvements essential to property values, the board may, with a 2/3 vote, assess special fees or seek alternative financing methods to ensure the continued maintenance and improvement of community standards. She looked up at me. This does not give them the right to use your house as collateral, not even close. This is about special assessments, not securing loans against individual properties. So what they did is illegal. Extremely illegal. What I need to find out is how they actually did it. You cannot just walk into a bank and use someone else's property as collateral. There has to be a signed document, usually notarized, giving them that authority. She leaned forward. Henry, have you signed anything for the HOA recently? Anything at all? I thought hard. Just the annual covenant renewal form, but that is just confirming I have read the rules. Do you have a copy? No, they collect them at the annual meeting. Her eyes narrowed. Describe the form. What did it look like? Just a single page, standard stuff. Name, address, signature line, date. Was there anything on the back? I froze. I do not know. I did not look. Rebecca sat back in her chair, tapping her pen against her lips. I have seen this scam before. They hide authorization language in fine print on the back of seemingly innocuous forms. If you signed it without reading both sides, they could argue you gave consent. But I would never agree to that. Intent does not matter if you signed, but, she held up a finger, there are strict disclosure requirements for this kind of thing. If they buried it in fine print without explicitly drawing your attention to what you were signing, it would not hold up in court. I need to get my hands on that form. The annual meeting was 3 months ago. Then we need to request copies of all documents you have signed, which is your legal right. I will send them a formal request today. She made another note. In the meantime, I want to know more about this loan. How much? What bank? What it was supposedly for? Patricia mentioned community improvements. Right, I'm going to pull public records, see what I can find. This loan, if it exists, would have been recorded with the county. She looked at me seriously. Henry, I need you to prepare yourself. If they actually manage to secure a loan using your house, and if they can produce documentation suggesting you consented, this could get complicated. We will fight it, but it might take time. How much time? Months, potentially. Maybe longer if it goes to trial. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. Can they really force me out of my house? Not if I have anything to say about it. I'm going to file an emergency motion first thing tomorrow morning to halt any foreclosure proceedings until we can get to the bottom of this. But Henry, you need to be prepared for a fight. HOAs can be vindictive, especially when they get caught doing something illegal. She was not kidding. That evening, I came home to find a bright orange notice stapled to my front door. It was a list of violations, everything from my mailbox being the wrong shade of black to weeds in my flower bed, to my lawn, furniture not being aesthetically consistent with community standards. Each violation carried a $50 fine, totaling $600, due within 7 days. I took pictures of everything and sent them to Rebecca. She called me immediately. They are trying to bury you in fines. Do not pay them, not yet. This is harassment, and it shows consciousness of guilt. They know they messed up, and they are trying to create a paper trail showing you are a problem homeowner. What if they fine me more? Let them. We are documenting everything. This actually helps our case. The next few days were a nightmare. I came home Wednesday to find a tow truck trying to remove my car from my own driveway, because according to a new notice, vehicles were not allowed to be parked in driveways overnight, only in garages. I had to argue with the tow truck driver for 20 minutes before he finally left, muttering about crazy HOAs. Thursday brought another notice, this one informing me that my house color, which was the exact shade of beige approved when I bought the house, was now in violation because the HOA had updated the approved color palette. I had 30 days to repaint or face a $500 fine. Friday morning, Rebecca called with news. I found the loan. It was filed with Boulder County 3 weeks ago. The HOA borrowed $2.4 million from Rocky Mountain Credit Union, secured by 8 properties in your neighborhood. 8 houses, including mine? Yes. The loan documents list all 8 properties as collateral. I spoke with the credit union, and they claim they have signed authorization from all 8 homeowners. That is impossible. I know. I requested copies of the authorizations under discovery rules. They are required to provide them within 10 days. She paused. Henry, who is the HOA president? A woman named Sharon Murray. She has been president for about 2 years. And the rest of the board? I do not know all of them. Patricia Hendricks is the treasurer. There's a guy named Donald something, and a woman named Brenda. I need full names. Can you find out? I think they are listed on the HOA website. Good. Send me everything. I want to know who we are dealing with. I pulled up the Pinewood Grove HOA website, which was surprisingly professional looking. The board members were listed with photos and brief bios. Sharon Murray, president, a perfectly coiffed blonde woman in her late 40s with a smile that did not reach her eyes. Patricia Hendricks, treasurer, who looked exactly like she sounded on the phone, stern and humorless. Donald Bradford, secretary, a balding man who apparently worked in insurance, and Brenda Cartwright, member-at-large, who listed her occupation as homemaker and community advocate. I sent all the information to Rebecca and tried to go about my weekend, but it was impossible to relax. Every time I looked out my window, I saw Sharon Murray's black Mercedes driving slowly past my house, her head turning to stare at my property like she was cataloging new violations. Monday morning brought the breakthrough. Rebecca called me at work, her voice tight with controlled anger. Henry, you need to see this. Can you come to my office right now? I am at work. Call in sick. This cannot wait. I told my boss I had a family emergency and drove to Rebecca's office, my mind racing through terrible possibilities. She met me in the lobby and practically dragged me to her conference room, where she had documents spread across the entire table. The credit union sent over the authorization forms. Look at this. She shoved a piece of paper at me. It was a photocopy of a form with my name typed at the top. The body of the document was dense legal text authorizing the HOA to use my property as collateral for loans up to $5 million. At the bottom was a signature that looked nothing like mine. That's not my signature, I said immediately. I know. Look at this one. She handed me another form, this one with a different name, Michael Harrison, one of my neighbors. The signature was completely different from the first one, but equally fake-looking. They forged all of them? Yes, and they were not even good at it. Each signature is different, but they all have the same kind of hesitation marks, like someone was copying slowly. They probably traced them from other documents. Rebecca was pacing now, her energy barely contained. This is not just civil fraud, Henry. This is criminal forgery, identity theft, potentially wire fraud if they used email or phone to facilitate the loan. We are talking felonies. What do? We go to the police. But first, I want to get statements from the other homeowners. I need to confirm they did not sign either. Can you help me contact them? I knew most of my neighbors at least casually. Michael Harrison lived 3 houses down, a software engineer who worked from home. Jennifer Palmer across the street was a nurse. The Kowalskis next door were a retired couple. I had seen the other names on the list around the neighborhood, but did not know them well. We started with Michael. Rebecca and I walked to his house, and he answered the door in sweatpants and a t-shirt, looking confused. Henry, what's up? Michael, this is my attorney, Rebecca Ellison. We need to ask you something important. Did you sign any forms for the HOA recently authorizing them to use your house as collateral for a loan? His face went pale. What? No. Why would I do that? Rebecca showed him the forged document. He stared at it, his hand shaking slightly. That is not my signature. I mean, it is kind of close, but no. I never signed this. What is going on? We explained everything. By the time we finished, Michael was furious. They used my house as collateral? Without asking? That is insane. Can they do that? No, Rebecca said firmly. It is extremely illegal. I am gathering evidence to take to the police. Would you be willing to give a statement? Absolutely. These people have been driving me crazy for months. Last week they fined me because my dog barked after 10 p.m. My dog was inside. I think they just hate me. We spent the rest of the day going door to door. Every single homeowner whose name appeared on the loan documents told the same story. None of them had signed anything authorizing the HOA to use their property as collateral. Several showed us their signatures from other documents, making it clear the forgeries were amateur at best. By evening, Rebecca had statements from all 8 homeowners. We reconvened at her office where she drafted a formal complaint. I am taking this to the Boulder police tomorrow morning, she said. This is clear-cut fraud. But I also want to file an emergency motion to void the loan and remove all liens on your properties. The credit union is going to be furious, but that is their problem. They should have done proper due diligence. What happens to Sharon and the others? If the police find probable cause, they will be arrested. Then it goes to the district attorney, who will decide what charges to file. Given the amount of money involved and the number of victims, I would expect serious felony charges. I drove home feeling like I was in a fever dream. This morning I thought I was just dealing with an overzealous HOA. Now I was apparently the victim of a major fraud scheme. Part of me felt vindicated, but another part was terrified about what would happen next. That night, I could not sleep. I kept thinking about what the loan was supposed to be for. Community improvements, Patricia had said. But what improvements? The community looked exactly the same as it had when I moved in 5 years ago. Same roads, same landscaping, same everything. The next morning, Rebecca called me from the police station. I'm here with Detective Morris from the Financial Crimes Unit. He wants to talk to all 8 homeowners today if possible. Can you help coordinate? Yes, of course. Good. We are meeting at the community center at 2 p.m. The police want to do this quickly, before anyone on the HOA board finds out and potentially destroys evidence. I spent the morning calling and texting my neighbors. Everyone agreed to come. At 1:30, I walked over to the Pinewood Grove Community Center, a modest building near the neighborhood entrance. Detective Morris was already there, a tall black man in his 40s with sharp eyes and an air of competence. He took statements from each of us, comparing the forged signatures to our real ones, documenting the timeline, asking detailed questions about our interactions with the HOA board. When he was finished, he stood up and addressed all of us. Folks, I am going to be straight with you. This is one of the clearer cases of fraud I have seen in a while. The forgeries are obvious, the paper trail is solid, and the amount of money involved makes this serious. I am going to get warrants for the arrest of the board members and warrants to search their homes and the HOA records. That should happen within the next few days. What about our houses? Jennifer Palmer asked, her voice tight with worry. Are we safe from foreclosure? Rebecca stepped in. I filed an emergency motion this morning. We have a hearing scheduled for Thursday. I am confident the judge will void the loan and remove all liens, but until then, nobody should panic. Document everything, do not pay any HOA fines, and do not sign anything without showing it to me first. We filed out of the community center, and I saw Sharon Murray's Mercedes parked across the street. She was sitting in the driver's seat, staring at us with an expression I could not read. When our eyes met, she started her car and drove away quickly. She knows, I said to Rebecca. Probably. But it is too late for her to do anything about it. The evidence is already with the police. Thursday's hearing was surreal. The courtroom was packed with all 8 affected homeowners, plus reporters who had somehow gotten wind of the story. The credit union sent a lawyer, a nervous-looking young woman who kept shuffling papers. The HOA board was represented by an older attorney who looked like he wished he was anywhere else. Judge Patricia Mendoza, a stern woman with silver hair, reviewed Rebecca's motion with obvious displeasure. When she looked up, her gaze fixed on the HOA's attorney. Counselor, I have reviewed the submitted evidence. These authorizations are clearly forged. Does your client dispute this? The attorney stood. Your Honor, my clients maintain that they acted in good faith and believed the authorizations were genuine. Your clients are members of the HOA board. They live in the same community as the plaintiffs. Are you seriously suggesting they did not notice they were submitting forged signatures? Your Honor, the board relied on documentation provided by their management company. What management company? The attorney hesitated. I am not at liberty to say at this time. Judge Mendoza's expression could have frozen lava. You are not at liberty? This is my courtroom, Counselor. You will answer the question or I will hold your clients in contempt. Pinewood Management Services, Your Honor. Rebecca was on her feet. Your Honor, I have researched Pinewood Management Services. It is a shell company registered to a P.O. box. The listed owner is Sharon Murray, the HOA president. The courtroom erupted in angry muttering. Judge Mendoza banged her gavel. Order! Counselor, are you telling me the HOA president created a fake management company to facilitate fraud against her own neighbors? Your Honor, I was not aware of that information until this moment. Then I suggest you have a very serious conversation with your clients. The motion is granted. The loan is voided. All liens are removed from the plaintiff properties, and I am referring this matter to the district attorney's office for immediate criminal investigation." She looked at all of us. "The plaintiffs are awarded court costs and attorney fees to be paid by the HOA. If the HOA lacks sufficient funds, the board members will be personally liable. We are adjourned." Walking out of the courthouse felt like floating. Michael Harrison let out a whoop and hugged his wife. Jennifer Palmer was crying with relief. Rebecca just looked grimly satisfied. "This is not over," she said to me. "The criminal case is just beginning, but your house is safe. They cannot touch it." That evening, I finally allowed myself to relax. I cracked open a beer, sat on my back deck, and watched the sunset over the mountains. For the first time in 2 weeks, I felt like I could breathe. The peace lasted exactly 12 hours. I woke up Friday morning to the sound of sirens. Police cars were parked in front of Sharon Murray's house 3 streets over. I pulled on clothes and walked over, joining a crowd of neighbors watching as officers led Sharon out in handcuffs. She was crying and protesting, saying this was all a misunderstanding, but the officers were unmoved. 20 minutes later, they arrested Patricia Hendricks, then Donald Bradford. Brenda Cartwright apparently saw what was happening and tried to run, actually getting in her car and attempting to drive away before police blocked her in and pulled her out. That video went viral on neighborhood social media within an hour. Detective Morris called me that afternoon. "Mr. Fletcher, we executed search warrants on all 4 board members. You are not going to believe what we found." "Try me." Sharon Murray has been embezzling from the HOA for at least 3 years. The $2.4 million loan? About half of it was supposed to go toward repaving roads and updating the community pool. The other half went straight into accounts she controlled. We found evidence of shell companies, fake invoices, the whole 9 yards. The other board members were either actively involved or criminally negligent in their oversight. How much did she steal? Still adding it up, but probably close to $1.5 million over time. She has a second house in Vail we did not know about, a boat, a luxury car, all bought with HOA money. That is insane. It gets worse. The reason she took out the loan was because the HOA accounts were almost empty. She had stolen so much that there was not enough money to cover basic expenses. She was trying to cover her tracks by getting a massive influx of cash, using your houses as leverage because the HOA itself had no assets left to borrow against. I sat down heavily. So this whole thing was just her trying to hide theft? Exactly, and it almost worked. If you had not fought back, if you had just accepted the foreclosure threat, she might have gotten away with it for a few more years. The story exploded in local media. Boulder Daily Camera ran it on the front page. HOA president arrested for $1 million fraud scheme. Denver news stations sent reporters. The story made it to Reddit and Twitter, where people shared their own HOA horror stories and praised our neighborhood for fighting back. The criminal case moved surprisingly quickly. Sharon Murray was charged with 8 counts of forgery, 8 counts of identity theft, multiple counts of wire fraud and embezzlement, and 1 count of criminal impersonation. Patricia Hendricks got similar charges. Donald Bradford and Brenda Cartwright were charged as accessories, with the prosecution arguing they knew about the fraud and did nothing to stop it. Rebecca represented all 8 of us in a civil suit against the defendants, seeking damages for emotional distress, legal fees, and the diminished property values caused by the cloud on our titles. The defendants tried to claim they were indemnified by HOA insurance, but the insurance company promptly denied coverage for intentional criminal acts. The trial was scheduled for 6 months later, but it never got that far. 2 weeks before trial, Sharon's attorney reached out to Rebecca about a plea deal. Sharon was broke, facing 20 years in prison, and terrified. She agreed to plead guilty to all charges in exchange for a 15-year sentence with possibility of parole after 10. She also agreed to cooperate fully in the civil case and to liquidate all her assets to pay restitution. Patricia took a similar deal, though her sentence was lighter, 8 years, because she had not been the mastermind. Donald and Brenda both pleaded to lesser charges and got probation plus substantial fines. The civil settlement took longer to hammer out, but eventually we reached an agreement. Sharon's house in Vail was sold, along with her boat, her luxury car, and everything else of value. The money was split between the 8 of us and used to cover our legal fees and compensate us for the nightmare. I ended up with about $60,000 after everything was settled, but the money was not the point. The point was that we had fought back against people who thought they could abuse their tiny amount of power with impunity. We had proven that even an HOA board hiding behind bylaws and covenants could not break the law without consequences. The neighborhood held an emergency election for a new HOA board. We elected Michael Harrison as president. His first official act was to drastically limit board powers, requiring homeowner approval for any expense over $5,000. His second act was to loosen the ridiculous restrictions that had made life miserable. Grass could be up to 4 inches high instead of 2. Trash cans could be visible for up to 24 hours. Houses could be painted any reasonable neutral color without explicit approval. Life slowly returned to normal, though the neighborhood was changed. People who had barely known each other before were now friends, bonded by shared trauma and shared victory. We started having regular block parties. We looked out for each other. I ran into Jennifer Palmer at the grocery store about a year after everything happened. She smiled when she saw me. "Henry, I have been meaning to thank you. If you had not fought back, if you had just let them steamroll you, who knows what would have happened to all of us." "Rebecca did most of the work," I said. "Maybe, but you started it. You refused to just accept what they were telling you. That took courage." I thought about that conversation a lot in the following months. It had taken courage, I supposed, but it had not felt like it at the time. It had felt like desperation and anger and a refusal to let someone steal my home. The case became something of a cautionary tale in real estate and legal circles. Rebecca gave a presentation at a national HOA conference about the dangers of unchecked board power. Several states, including Colorado, passed new laws requiring stricter oversight of HOA finances and limiting the ability of boards to take actions without homeowner consent. Sharon Murray went to prison and became inmate number 2749563 at the Colorado Women's Correctional Facility. I never thought about her much after sentencing. She had tried to destroy my life and the lives of my neighbors to cover her own crimes. She deserved what she got. But I did think about the broader lesson, how easy it had been for someone in a minor position of power to abuse that power, how close she had come to succeeding. How many people probably do succeed in HOAs and other small organizations because nobody bothers to fight back or check the paperwork. I kept every document from the case in a filing cabinet in my home office. Sometimes I would open it and flip through the papers, reminding myself of how close I had come to losing everything. The forged signature that looked nothing like mine, the threatening letters, the fraudulent lien on my house. 2 years after the arrest, I attended Sharon's parole hearing. She had served the minimum required before being eligible, and her attorney argued she had been a model prisoner who deserved early release. I sat in the back of the hearing room and listened as she gave a tearful apology, saying she had made terrible mistakes and learned her lesson. The parole board asked if anyone wanted to speak. I stood up. "My name is Henry Fletcher. Sharon Murray tried to steal my house to cover up the fact that she had already stolen over $1 million from my neighborhood. She forged my signature and the signatures of 7 other innocent people. She showed no remorse until she got caught. She has served 2 years of a 15-year sentence. That is not enough." Sharon's attorney objected, saying I was being vindictive. The parole board chair cut him off. "Mr. Fletcher has a right to be heard. Continue, please." "I just want to say that Sharon did not make mistakes. She committed calculated, deliberate crimes over a period of years. She had countless opportunities to stop, to come clean, to do the right thing. She never did. She only stopped because she got caught. 2 years is nothing compared to the damage she caused. I urge you to deny parole." The other victims gave similar statements. Jennifer Palmer talked about the nightmares she still had about losing her house. Michael Harrison described the anxiety that plagued him whenever he got any kind of official letter. The Kowalskis explained that they had almost divorced from the stress. The parole board deliberated for 15 minutes and denied parole. Sharon would serve at least another 3 years before being eligible again. Walking out of that hearing, I felt something like closure. Not forgiveness exactly, but a sense that justice, imperfect as it was, had been served. Life continued. I got promoted at work, started dating a woman I met at one of the neighborhood block parties, repainted my house a shade of gray that definitely would have violated the old HOA rules. Nobody complained. The story still came up occasionally in conversation. New neighbors moving in would hear the tale and look at me with a mix of awe and disbelief. Was it really that bad? Yes, I would tell them, it really was. But the neighborhood itself thrived. Property values actually went up once the scandal was resolved and word got out that we had a functional, reasonable HOA. The pool got renovated using money from the settlement and proper budgeting. The roads got repaved. Community events brought people together. Michael Harrison turned out to be an excellent HOA president. He was fair, transparent, and actually listened to homeowners. Under his leadership, we established strict financial controls, regular audits, and term limits for board members. The bylaws were rewritten to include protections against the kind of abuse Sharon had perpetrated. 3 years after the arrest, I got a call from a journalist working on a story about HOA fraud. She had read about our case and wanted to interview me for a national magazine article. "Your case was really the catalyst for a lot of reform," she told me. "The laws that passed in Colorado inspired similar legislation in 14 other states. You probably saved thousands of people from similar situations." I'd never thought about it that way. We had just been trying to save our own homes. But I supposed that was how change happened sometimes. Regular people refusing to accept injustice, fighting back even when it seemed hopeless. The article came out 6 months later in a major national magazine, a long investigative piece about HOA abuse across America. Our case featured prominently, with interviews from me, Rebecca, Michael, and several others. Sharon Murray was quoted from prison, still insisting she had been trying to help the community. The publication of the article brought a fresh wave of attention. I did a few radio interviews, appeared on a local news panel discussing HOA reform, even got invited to speak at a community organization conference. Through it all, I kept coming back to that initial phone call. Patricia Hendricks telling me my house was being foreclosed, the shock and disbelief, the determination to fight back. If I had just accepted it, if I had not called Marcus, if I had not found Rebecca, everything would have been different. Sometimes I wondered what happened to the credit union that had approved the loan. They had sued the HOA board members and eventually settled for a fraction of the loan amount, taking a huge loss. I heard they had fired several loan officers and completely revamped their collateral verification process. Good, I thought. They should have checked more carefully before accepting obviously forged documents. 5 years after everything started, I refinanced my house. The title company found no liens, no clouds, no issues whatsoever. My property was completely clean. It felt like the final chapter closing on the whole nightmare. I ran into Detective Morris at a coffee shop shortly after the refinancing. He was retired now, enjoying his pension. We chatted for a few minutes about the case. "You know what always stuck with me?" he said. "Sharon Murray lived 3 streets away from you. She saw you every day. She went to the same grocery store, drove the same roads, and she still thought she could get away with using your house as collateral in a fraud scheme. That takes a special kind of arrogance." "Or desperation," I offered. "Maybe both." He sipped his coffee. "Anyway, I'm glad it worked out. Not all of them do." I knew he was right. We had been lucky in some ways. Lucky that Rebecca was skilled and tenacious. Lucky that the forgeries were so obvious. Lucky that all 8 homeowners had been willing to fight together instead of trying to make individual deals. But luck was not the whole story. We had fought back. We had demanded accountability. We had refused to be victims. The neighborhood had a big celebration for the 5-year anniversary of the arrests. Someone made a cake decorated with a house and the words, "Home Sweet Home, no thanks to the HOA." We all laughed, but there was an undercurrent of real emotion. We had been through something traumatic together and come out stronger. Jennifer Palmer gave a toast. "To the worst HOA board in history and to the neighbors who stopped them. May we never take our homes for granted, and may we never forget that standing up for what is right matters." We all raised our glasses. Michael Harrison added, "And may our grass always be just slightly too long." Everyone laughed. It was a good moment, a reminder of how far we had come. As the party wound down, I stood in my backyard watching the sunset over the mountains, the same view I had enjoyed for 7 years now. My house, my property, my home, nobody could take it away without my permission. Not an HOA, not a board president, not anyone. Rebecca called me the next week with unexpected news. "Henry, I just got off the phone with the Colorado Attorney General's office. They want to feature our case in a statewide consumer protection initiative. They are creating educational materials about HOA fraud and how to fight back. Would you be willing to participate?" Of course. Over the next few months, I worked with state officials on videos, pamphlets, and online resources to help other homeowners recognize and combat HOA abuse. My story became part of a larger narrative about consumer rights and community organizing. The materials launched with a press conference at the state capitol. The Attorney General spoke about the importance of vigilance and the power of ordinary citizens to demand accountability. I stood behind her with the other victims from my neighborhood, all of us dressed professionally, looking nothing like the terrified homeowners we had been 5 years earlier. After the press conference, a young man approached me. He was nervous, clutching a folder of documents. "Mr. Fletcher? I'm sorry to bother you, but I think my HOA is doing something similar. They sent me a notice about a special assessment, and when I asked questions, they threatened to put a lien on my house. I do not know what to do." I took his information and connected him with Rebecca. 2 weeks later, she called to tell me it was indeed another fraud case, though smaller in scale. The board president had been inflating contractor invoices and pocketing the difference. "You saved this guy," Rebecca said. "He probably would have just paid the assessment and never known he was being ripped off." It felt good to help, to turn my experience into something useful for others. Over the next year, I heard from dozens of homeowners facing various HOA issues. I could not help all of them, but I connected them with resources and attorneys and encouraged them to fight back when appropriate. The neighborhood continued to evolve. New families moved in, attracted by the reasonable HOA and the strong community bonds. The old guard, people who remembered the Sharon Murray era, became unofficial mentors to newcomers, sharing the story as both warning and inspiration. Michael Harrison stepped down as HOA president after 3 terms, having accomplished his goal of creating a stable, functional organization. A new president was elected, a woman named Angela Torres, who had moved in 2 years earlier. She ran on a platform of maintaining Michael's reforms while finding new ways to build community. I attended her first board meeting and was struck by how different it was from the old days. Everything was transparent. Homeowners asked questions and got straight answers. The budget was reviewed line by line. Decisions were made democratically. This was what an HOA was supposed to be. Not a vehicle for petty tyrants to harass their neighbors, but a tool for maintaining shared resources and building community. 6 years after the initial phone call that had started everything, I received notice that Sharon Murray was being released on parole. She had served 8 years of her 15-year sentence and had apparently convinced the parole board she was rehabilitated. Part of me felt the familiar anger resurface. 8 years was not enough for what she had done, but another part of me felt mostly indifference. She had already lost everything that mattered: her house, her reputation, her freedom. What was left of her life would be defined by being a convicted felon and embezzler. I heard through the neighborhood grapevine that she moved to a small town in Wyoming after her release, trying to start over somewhere nobody knew her story. Good luck with that in the internet age, I thought. Her name would always bring up articles about the fraud. Meanwhile, life in Pinewood Grove continued its gentle rhythm. Block parties and board meetings, neighborhood watch and holiday decorations, the occasional disagreement about parking or noise, but nothing that could not be resolved with a simple conversation. I realized one day that I had not thought about the HOA scandal in months. It was no longer the defining event of my recent history, just a thing that had happened. I had moved on, we all had. But I never forgot the lessons. Check everything before you sign. Question authority when something seems wrong. Stand up for yourself and your neighbors. Document everything, and never ever assume that people in positions of power, no matter how small, have your best interests at heart. Rebecca and I stayed friends. She had built a thriving practice representing homeowners in disputes with HOAs and became something of a local celebrity in real estate law circles. She credited our case with launching her specialization. "You changed my career," she told me over dinner one evening. "Before your case, I was doing boring contract reviews and property transfers. Now I get to fight the good fight every day. So thank you." "I think I am the one who should be thanking you. You saved my house. We saved it together. You by refusing to give up, me by knowing the law. That is how it works." 7 years after everything started, I was walking my dog through the neighborhood when a car pulled up beside me. The driver rolled down her window. She was maybe 60, with gray hair and worried eyes. "Excuse me, are you Henry Fletcher?" "Yes." "I read about what happened here. With your HOA, I'm thinking about buying a house in this neighborhood, but I wanted to know, is it safe now? Is the HOA trustworthy?" I thought about how to answer. "The HOA is completely reformed. New board, new bylaws, new safeguards. But honestly, you should not just trust what I say. Go to a board meeting, review the financials, ask questions. That is what I should have done from the beginning." She smiled. "Good answer, thank you." She drove off and I continued my walk. That interaction summed up everything, really. Trust, but verify. Hope for the best, but protect yourself. Be involved in your community, but keep your eyes open. The house 3 doors down went up for sale, and I watched with interest to see who would buy it. A young couple with a toddler, it turned out. They introduced themselves to everyone on the street, excited about their first home purchase. I told them the story one evening when they invited several neighbors over for a barbecue. They listened with wide eyes, occasionally glancing at each other in disbelief. "That is terrifying," the wife said. "How do you prevent something like that from happening again?" "Stay involved," I said. "Go to board meetings, review the budget, ask questions when something does not make sense. Most HOA boards are honest people trying to maintain the neighborhood, but sometimes you get bad actors, and the only defense is vigilance." The husband raised his beer. "To vigilance, then, and to good neighbors who fight back." We drank to that. 8 years after the phone call that changed everything, I looked at refinancing again to take advantage of lower interest rates. The process was smooth, routine, boring in the best possible way. No issues with the title, no unexpected liens, no drama. That was what normal was supposed to feel like. And it felt good. I sometimes thought about writing a book about the experience. Rebecca encouraged me to do it, saying it could help even more people. But I never quite got around to it, maybe because I was too busy living my life instead of reliving the past. The neighborhood continued to thrive. Property values climbed steadily. Crime remained low. The schools were good. It was, by any measure, a desirable place to live. And none of that would have been possible if we had not fought back when Sharon Murray tried to steal our homes. That was the real lesson. The most important victories are often the ones where you simply refuse to lose. I kept in touch with the other 7 homeowners whose houses had been used as collateral. We had a group text chain that was mostly quiet but would erupt into activity whenever someone saw news about another HOA scandal. Michael Harrison sent a link to a story about an HOA in Florida that had tried something similar. "See, we started a trend," he joked. "More like we exposed how common this is," Jennifer Palmer replied. She was probably right. Our case had not been unique, just uniquely well documented and successfully prosecuted. How many other homeowners had been victimized and never fought back? How many had paid unjust fines or given in to illegal demands because they did not know they had options? That was why the educational materials we helped create were so important. Knowledge was power. Knowing your rights made all the difference. 9 years after everything started, I paid off my mortgage completely for the second time. This time there was no drama, no unexpected phone calls, no criminal conspiracies. Just a final payment and a satisfaction of mortgage document filed with the county. I owned my house free and clear. It was mine, completely and absolutely. No bank held a note, no HOA could threaten it, no one could take it away. That feeling of security, of true ownership, was something I would never take for granted again. The neighborhood held a small ceremony when the last of the civil lawsuit settlement money was distributed. There had been some funds held in escrow pending final appeals and asset liquidation, but everything was finally resolved. We each got a check for another few $1,000s, a final punctuation mark on the whole ordeal. "What will you do with your share?" Angela Torres, the HOA president, asked me at the ceremony. "I am thinking about donating it to a legal aid fund for homeowners fighting HOA abuse," I said. "Seems fitting." "That's a good idea. I might do the same." Several of us ended up pooling our settlement money to establish a small grant fund through Rebecca's law firm. It would help homeowners who could not afford legal representation in HOA disputes. We called it the Pinewood Grove Justice Fund, a reminder that our neighborhood had turned something terrible into something positive. 10 years after the phone call that started everything, the neighborhood held a commemoration. Not a celebration exactly. More like a remembrance and a renewal of our commitment to vigilance and community. We gathered at the community center, the same place where we had first met with Detective Morris. Someone had made a timeline of events, posted on the wall like a museum exhibit: the initial foreclosure threat, the discovery of the fraud, the arrests, the trial, the convictions, the reforms. Looking at it all laid out like that, I was struck by how much had happened in such a compressed time. From that first phone call to Sharon's arrest had been less than 2 months. It had felt like years. Michael Harrison gave a speech. "We learned a lot about ourselves during this crisis. We learned that we are stronger together than apart. We learned that standing up for what is right matters even when it is hard. We learned that our homes are not just buildings, they are our security, our futures, our dreams. And we learned that we have to protect those things because nobody else will do it for us." Everyone applauded, because he was right. All of it was right. After the ceremony, I walked home slowly, taking in the familiar sights: the mountains in the distance, the neatly maintained but not obsessively controlled lawns, the houses in various shades of beige and gray and blue, all within reason, none requiring explicit HOA approval. This was my neighborhood. These were my neighbors. This was my home. And nobody, not Sharon Murray, not Patricia Hendricks, not any future board member with delusions of grandeur, could take that away. I unlocked my front door and stepped inside, feeling a profound sense of gratitude and peace. The nightmare was over. The fight had been won. Life could simply be lived. And that, I thought, was the happy ending. Not dramatic or cinematic, just quiet and real and earned. My house was mine. My community was strong. And I had learned that sometimes the most important thing you can do is simply refuse to be a victim. The phone rang. I glanced at the caller ID, half expecting some new crisis, but it was just Marcus calling to chat about weekend plans. "Hey man," I answered. "What is up?" "Just checking in. You want to grab dinner Friday?" "Yeah, sounds good." We talked for a few minutes about nothing in particular. Normal conversation, normal plans, normal life. It was perfect. I hung up and looked around my living room. My house, my rules, my life, everything the way it should be. And that simple normalcy, that freedom from fear and harassment, was worth more than all the settlement money in the world. It was worth fighting for. It was worth protecting. It was worth everything.